morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SASE Show. We're coming to you today from bright and sunny Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and I'm very pleased to have with me today Abid Adam, Group Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at Axiata Group, a brand that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Abid, welcome to the SASE Show.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for hosting me, Sid.
Of course, really an honor to have you on the show, and thanks for making time for us. Abid, most of our audience know who you are. Axiata is a very famous brand. You're a very well-known name in our circles. But for the broader audience, could you maybe introduce yourself and your journey in the InfoSec space and what you're doing currently at Axiata?
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And hello and warm welcome to all your listeners. If I had to sort of reflect on the last 5 to 6 years, it has nothing but been a short of growth and, for me, personal and professional growth and impact. When I started at Axiata, I started as a group CISO. That was my initial role. Then the role evolved to looking after data privacy. And then over the last, from 2020, so over the last 2 to 3 years, it has been a lot more broader in terms of compliance, ethics, integrity, and enterprise risk management. So now I'm a Group Chief Risk and Compliance Officer. So within my remit, I have lawyers, I have accountants, I have cybersecurity experts, I have data privacy professionals that I work with and reporting to me. And the essence of the entire integrated role is to ensure that we have one common risk and compliance way of integrating with the business. Now, when I reflect on that journey itself, I've been blessed simply because from the get-go, when I started my role as a group CISO, Axiata was very committed to cybersecurity. There was a strong tone from the top. And that journey led me to do amazing things that has a material impact on the customers we serve across the board. I've seen our team grow and also deliver products and services both internally and for our external customers that has material change in the way they engage us. So I feel that my personal journey at Axiata has been one that I've been truly blessed with. My engagements with the leadership, the board, and just overall sentiment in terms of how cybersecurity is embedded in the way Axiata thinks about business itself has been truly remarkable.
Very interesting. And I think there's a couple of points that I want to build on through our conversation. One of them is you mentioned engagements with the board. That's a common topic for your peers and C-level executives in the industry, how to navigate those relationships and all of that. We'll go there. But the other interesting thing you said was internal and external customers. So what does that really mean, and what does Axiata's customer look like? And what did you mean when you said internal and external customers? So like the business side of things, right?
Yeah, sure. So I think whether it's cybersecurity or other elements of risk management, the way I kind of think about it is, what is the value proposition we bring to the table? As a team, what is the benefit or the service we provide? And so when I look at it, I sort of look at it in sort of a two-dimension. One is outside in and one is inside out. And when you take that and you sort of simplify that, then you have external customers that are directly impacted by the work that our team does. So allow me to elaborate. For example, if we are launching a product and it requires authentication, that authentication needs to be in a way implemented which is frictionless, smooth, and ensures that the customer doesn't feel that because you're introducing cybersecurity controls, it is impacting the experience. So a lot of the work we do, we have to ensure that we look at it from a customer perspective. On the second hand, or the way I look at it, which is also a lot of the back-end work that needs to happen. So customers, when I look at it, whether it's an IT team, whether it's a network team, we work quite closely with the legal department, procurement department, HR department. So these are all the internal customers that we look at. And those are also very important because if we introduce processes or controls that inhibits our colleagues to work in a more effective manner, then you have a very poor employee experience. Because just the way you look at customer experience, you have to look at employee experience as one of the measurements as to saying, okay, if I introduce these controls, what is the impact on employee experience? So that balance between ensuring that you have a right set of controls that does not negate the employee experience is very important. So when I talk about customers in a broad sense, I always want our team and myself to have that entrepreneurial mindset when we're engaging both internally and externally.
Yeah, that's a very unique perspective, and I think our InfoSec community would benefit from adopting this type of a mindset of internal and external customers, because they both feed into each other, right? If your internal customers are productive and happy, and if they're able to bring efficiency into their day-to-day work, that's going to translate into a better external customer experience, which ultimately results in competitive differentiation and business growth, right?
I mean, what I can add is, even our cybersecurity strategy, we sort of developed 3-year strategy. So the initial one was called Digital Trust 2020, which rolled out 2018, 2019, 2020. Then follow on to that, we developed another next 3-year strategy. It was called Digital Trust and Resilience. And that was during the just COVID period. So it was 21, 22, 23. And as we speak right now, we are looking at what does the next 3-year look like. But the essence of everything we do, it ties back into the view that we have that the role cybersecurity plays is to enhance trust, build resilience, and ensure that we are able to provide products and services both internally and externally that enables, whether it's in the consumer side or our own stakeholders internally, to achieve the goals and objectives. So it's really about trust, it's about resilience, and sort of that mindset is really important. Of course, you can do a lot of technical things, but you have to have a bigger purpose as to why. Why are you doing some of these projects or initiatives?
And that's going to feed into that business strategy. So technology in itself is not a strategy, right? It's the 100%. Strategy that you have, and you mentioned the phase strategy. So perhaps a lesson or some insight for the broader community is that to get to that point of treating your internal employees as customers and having that customer-centric view, you have to build a phase strategy that has resilience and other elements baked in. You can't just do it overnight. So it has to have a plan to it, right?
Yeah, I think when we think about strategy and the way we develop strategy is also a very inclusive process. And what I mean by that example, as I've mentioned, we are going through that right now, is when we develop a strategy, we identify a set of stakeholders first, and internal and external stakeholders. So we look at the partners we'll be working with, and we engage them as part of our team. And we ask them, where do you envision 3 years from now the world will look like? What are the things you guys are thinking about? We bring external think tanks, we have our internal business partners, we have business leaders, and we ask them the same question. Where do you envision the next 3 years looking like? So whatever the cybersecurity team develops, it has to tie in. In fact, what we actually do is take it one step further. Once a team has developed a 3-year strategy, we call back all the people that we engage with, all the stakeholders, and we put it back and say, does this resonate with you? Would you want to be part of this journey? Do you see yourself being excited about delivering the next 3-year journey itself that looks like that? And so everybody has, in a way, some sort of a small DNA or impact or thumbprint on that strategy. And when you're rolling it out, the execution is a lot more understood, and change management is a lot more easier, simply because from the concept we have adopted a co-creation mindset. And so then it's co-creation to co-execution all the way, and it's sort of a collective brain thought process that we adopt.
Interesting. So it also builds out into the future and the way the business is going to evolve, which brings me to a very topical discussion around generative AI and large language models. Obviously, the last 4 months have been an eye-opener for so many of us, right, in the different ways that we can use generative AI and generally AI models in our business, in our personal lives. So when you start thinking about this from a business perspective, from a risk perspective, how do you see generative AI and LLM? Is it an opportunity and a risk both, and how would you navigate that?
I think the way we look at it at Axiata is AI in general, and the mass AI availability is an opportunity. When we look at, and when we're deliberating this at the board risk committee and even at the board, we look at any technology innovation as a positive view. However, in saying that, we also have to ensure that we provide freedom within the framework. Right? There are some guardrails because we understand both the sort of the benefit and the cons of generative AI as a technology. So what we have embarked on is we have 6 principles that the board has approved. And these principles gives a very good guideline to any employee in the organization who wants to use generative AI. Furthermore, we have also encouraged using innovative technology, whether it's generative AI or other technologies, with a mindset of experimentation. So low-risk projects, low-impact projects, you should use these kind of technologies and see what you learn from it itself. So you take a risk-based approach when we are looking at exploring newer technologies to ensure that you are innovative, you are agile, you have modern thinking, yet you are not taking excessive risk. And so I think that's sort of the healthy trade-offs that we look at when we're looking at generative AI itself. Even in fact, in cybersecurity team, we are looking at generative AI for third-party risk management. We are looking at generative AI for threat and vulnerability management itself. We are engaging the partners we work with in terms of some of them have progressed already. So we are looking at the beta version of the generative AI technology. So again, going back to that concept of internal and external, if I use that sort of from a customer mindset, generative AI for us is the same thing. It's generative AI by business for business, which we help secure, put the right guardrails. But then you look at generative AI for security by security team. So there's two angles. A lot of these kind of things has different dimensions to it, because yes, business will use it in, let's say, customer services, or some marketing team will use it for content creation and so forth, and we need to help them with some sort of guiding principles. But what about cybersecurity leveraging the power of technology? And how do you ensure that the cybersecurity team has the similar mindset, just the way we're asking the business to think about this? So we're exploring generative AI in short in multiple ways. We have to ensure that we do the right thing. We have guiding principles which aligns to our organizational values, which are very simple, which we call it UIEP, uncompromising integrity, exceptional performance, and we tie and link it to that.
Interesting. And then we have to also keep in mind that attackers are definitely going to be using it as well. And I've played around with it a little bit, right? So obviously all these commercial models that are available, you can't get it to do something malicious because they're content filters, but you can manipulate the prompts for it to help you. For example, build a pretext for a phishing campaign, right? Very convincing emails to frame convincing emails. So I think the attackers are definitely using it. So I think from defender perspective, from the cybersecurity perspective, using it to enable productivity and improve our ability to automate security capabilities is super important. And from our perspective at Palo Alto Networks, AI has been a big focus for us in any case. The new trend is around generative AI, which is very important, but like we've been looking at analyzing large data sets to detect malware more effectively and so on for a number of years now, almost a decade. So I think this new trend of generative AI is the latest in the evolution of analytics and machine learning, but there's obviously a broader field to kind of look at as emerging areas.
Yeah. I mean, it helps in a certain cases, like you mentioned, phishing. I think the certain foundational elements never goes away. So your human firewall is critical, if more now than ever before, because as you mentioned, the ability of generative AI to develop phishing emails with a higher degree of accuracy is going to be something which means the defenders will have to think about ensuring that every single employee is very well versed in identifying phishing attacks. And some are really good. So you have to work on a notion. I mean, the way we think about it is assume breach, right? Because it's impossible for you to never have zero susceptibility rate when it comes to phishing. So the question then remains is what happens? Okay, if X percentage of your employees are going to be susceptible to that, then how do you adopt more of a layered approach to your security? What sort of a blast radius would that look like? And then ensure that you have appropriate controls, whether it's microsegmentation, whether your networks are designed in an access control manner, which allows to limit the impact of that breach itself. Is something one has to architect and think about that.
Yes, yes. Because ultimately, success as a defender is defined by not letting the attacker achieve their ultimate objective. So maybe a few phishing emails get through, but if you're able to implement a zero trust strategy to prevent the attacker from doing what they ultimately want, which is exfiltrating data or encrypting data, then I think it's a win for the security team, right? So very interesting. You actually mentioned a couple of things earlier around board, right? And in our conversations before we started recording this podcast, you mentioned that in your role you report directly to the CEO and the board, which I think is very unique in our industry. So could you shed a little bit more light on that? How do those conversations go, and how would you advise your peers, C-level executives, to navigate those board conversations?
Yeah, I mean, there's a pros and cons because many CISOs want to report to the CEO. So I think the good part about that is you're an equivalent peer to your CIOs and CTOs and so forth. So, and I think there will be obviously that healthy level of engagement. So my guidance to any CISO that wants to report directly to the CEO and to the board is really, I'm trying to think of an analogy. He or she should really be a Swiss Army knife. In a sense, yes, you got to be, I mean, it's given that you got to be good at cybersecurity, but that alone is not going to be enough. Right? You're going to have to think about a little bit more broadly on what is the other value proposition you bring to the sort of a table. And what I mean by that is when you ask what are the kind of conversations I have with the board every quarter or the board risk committee and so forth. And the way I kind of think about it is I put it in 4 R's. It's largely around risk, and risks not just backward looking. The board is really keen on knowing emerging risks and how does that impact whatever operations or the goals we're trying to achieve. Second is around reputation. So you talked about generative AI early on, and we just had last quarter discussions on generative AI. And generative AI was looked at it from both what is the impact of risk, what's the reputation, how do we manage that, how do we ensure that we achieve those goals. So second is the reputation. The third part about is revenue. And what I mean by revenue is, largely speaking, are there any opportunities or risks that impacts our revenue or the goals that we set out on? So a lot of the discussions, even macroeconomic discussions around forex volatility, interest rate volatility, inflation risk, and sort of the country risks that emanates on the impact of on the revenue. We deliberate quite a bit at the board risk committee on that. And last but not least, no organization can get away from is on regulations. So the fourth R I would kind of think about is regulations. I mean, I can just give you an example. When I started as a CISO, and then as I mentioned, I got an extended responsibility of looking after data privacy. So one of the exercises I did was just to look at all the markets we're operating across Southeast Asia and understand what are the laws and regulations we need to comply with. That was around end of 2017, early 2018, we started that exercise. I can confidently say that there were only 2 markets that I needed to worry about when it came to data privacy law. One was Malaysia, they got PDPA, and similarly, they had another privacy law in Singapore because we used to own M1 in Singapore back then. So if I would sort of just map out the markets we operate, the laws we need to comply with, there were only 2. Fast track 4 or 5 years down the line, today, there's not a market we operate across Southeast Asia. You can take from Sri Lanka to Nepal to everywhere else that does not have either data privacy bill or cybersecurity act either in progress or has been passed through.
Yeah.
So 3 years down the line, the regulatory landscape has significantly evolved in cybersecurity and data privacy itself. So the regulations, as I said, are key areas because the onslaught of new regulations has impact on how you design products, services, how that market needs to operate, and obviously the cost of compliance, what that looks like, and so forth. And the cybersecurity team and a broader risk and compliance team, the regulatory team, plays a very important part in helping the board and the CEO navigate through this sort of a regulatory onboarding of new regulatory laws and regulations itself. So I think by and large, if I sum it up, it's around 4 R's. It's really the risk, the revenue side of things, or any reputational risks. The boards are really sort of engaging on that, and then the regulatory part of it. I think if you cover those 4 areas that are broad themes, you should be okay.
Wow. So that, my friends, was a mini masterclass in how to have cybersecurity conversations with the board. Thank you, Abid, for that. This is a mini podcast within the podcast, right? This is great insight. So the topic of the show, or the theme of the show is SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, right? But do you think all the conversation that we've been having about strategy and cybersecurity outcomes, do frameworks like SASE and other things, do these help? Or what's your take on things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that whether it's SASE, CASB, DLP, I mean, these are all enablers, right? They do serve a certain purpose. So the way we think about this, myself and the team, when we sort of put on a drawing board, is not look at SASE or CASB or something and say, okay, how do I introduce this technology in my organization? We ask a question around where is the business going and what needs to take place in order for business to achieve its goal. And then unpack that to say, what are the best, whether it's tool, technology, capabilities we need to build to ensure we meet these objectives. Now, coming back to SASE itself, I think it has a place. I mean, we are telco, so we do a lot of, obviously, software-defined networking, software-defined WANs, and obviously any large organization may have head office branch kind of networks that's been set up. And even within the networks itself, you want, we take a risk-based approach, you want to segment your networks. You want to make sure that, I go back to this whole concept of reducing the blast radius. One of the things that obviously many organizations are tackling the issue of ransomware. And again, if you adopt assume breach mindset, you just go in a position that your organization at some point will get compromised. That's when you ask me what conversation I have with the board, the conversation I have with the board is no organization in the world today can say they're 100% secure. It's just impossible. All right, so let's say if you take that as your hypothesis, and then you build on that to say, if you get breach, or when you get breach, not if, when you get breach, what is it that the board believes we should never have sort of get compromised, or the systems should never go down, or the information should never be disclosed. Then when you look at that, so because in most organizations the environments are quite large. Some are in a way designed over a period of time. If you have organizations that have been operating for many years, so you have legacy network, which some networks are very flat. All right, so then you can say, okay, how do we architect our network in a way that we can't fix everything? And I don't think you should try and fix everything. Yeah. And then so how do you design the networks? And the way we think about that is when you take a risk-based approach, you take where are your crown jewels, and then you segment that part of the network. So then the engagement of the board is, look, if something does go wrong, we can confidently state that, yes, the other sides of your network may be impacted, but the core that you have determined are the critical essentials of your business is going to be protected. And then obviously now that core or whatever the important assets you're looking at are no longer just on-prem. This is a hybrid of on-prem and cloud. And even within cloud is not what one cloud provider, yeah. It's multiple yeah. cloud providers. Yeah. So you can see that complexity that sort of comes in securing the environment, and that's where SASE comes in, is designing the right networks, is trying to understand what needs to be playing, micro-segmentation. We speak about zero trust quite a bit, yes. Trust but verify. SASE, in my view, is another way of looking at it when you think about zero trust. Yeah, and you bring SASE in to enable zero trust. To me, it's almost synonymous. Different people use it separately, but if you really just take out the terminology and you just unpeel the conversation in terms of what it actually does, then it's the same thing. Yeah. Segmentation, right access to right services or applications or the users, and that's what SASE does too. Yeah. So I think, and then again, if you remove the technical conversation and you really ask yourself, why would you want to do this? Then if you look at a lot of the businesses, especially post-pandemic, are evolving into sort of a hybrid operating model. All right, and then hybrid operating model also is evolving into a virtualized environments. So these environments with a hybrid operating model, in a way, forces you to think about how you architect your network now. And again, the SASE will play a role, at least in my opinion, in all organizations that are sort of venturing in that journey. Yeah,
I think just to add to that, right, it's what I'm seeing in my conversations. It's a lot about the application now. Like if you can build visibility from both from a resilience and user availability perspective, but also from a security perspective of what are the crown jewels in terms of the applications, then you can start putting in place access control and security inspection and user experience improvements based on how critical the application is to the business, right? Yeah. So
I mean, you see, like the way we think about it is we're always looking in a way, a forward-looking view, because the when you introduce these technologies, it takes time to sort of really get it embedded into the way organization operates. So let's look at example right now. I mentioned to you, we're looking at forward three-year looking view. When we sort of envision 3 years from now, end of 2026, let's say 2027, what would the world look like? 5G will be rolled out. We can see edge computing quite a bit. So a lot of the stuff is going to be pushed on the edge, applications and the rollout of software-defined networks. So networks are going to be a lot more software. Autonomous networks will be a lot of another things that I see, at least in our part of the world, sort of evolving. So when you look at, 5G, SD-WAN, autonomous networks, edge computing, then you ask yourself, what type of architecture you need to design? What type of security controls you need to define? And not when the business is already ready to roll out.
Yeah.
Because then the problem with that is then security has a knee-jerk reaction to the problem. So when we sort of think about it, we say, okay, give ourselves some breathing space of 3 years runway. Okay, so we have discussions with the board, the CIOs, the CTOs from now, that our future architecture will look like what I've mentioned.
Yeah.
Then a security team is embedded as part of the architecture blueprint, whether the team is developing network services or IT is rolling out applications on the edge or something of that sort. And as part of the gating process, before even IT has bought a single equipment or anything, it's already baked into it.
Yeah.
So when security team, let's say the IT team right now or the network team at this point in time are doing a lot of trial, sort of testing and evaluating 5G technology, the rollout, deployment, how it works, and the software side of things. We bake it into that process when they are actually evaluating 5G. So then even security team is learning with the network team as to, okay, what's working? Because some of these things, nobody can say, well, on 5G security, I have 10 years experience. Nobody. So you're sort of experimenting as you're going along, but we're baking it in now. Why? Because we know that 3 years from now, by 2027, 5G will be rolled out. You don't want security team to be thinking about how do I secure 5G and then experimenting when a business is going full throttle on rolling out 5G.
Yeah.
Because right now business is testing pilot sites on 5G.
Yeah.
So this is a good time for security to get involved and build your security architecture with the way business is evolving.
Right.
So I mean, that's just one example on, I can give you an edge computing, microservices, APIs, all the cloud computing. I mean, these are all, yes, there's a technical part of it, but there's a business part of it because business is testing products and services.
Yeah.
Security should get involved at this point in time, build a three-year runway so you don't get into a situation where in year 3, when the business is full throttle, that's the only day you wake up and say, what do I do about security now?
Yes.
So it's baked into the process.
Right. So you select the architecture while it's being evaluated and select an architecture that can scale once things
I
hit
would
production.
say architecture to me is even secondary. I think one that you need to ask, and that's why I said when we're developing a strategy, we take one step forward. We go ask, we actually have discussions with all the country CEOs, the boards, where do you see 3 years from now for your business? Where do you see it going? Then we ask the question, 5G rollout, what will 5G rollout look like? What's the coverage you're aiming for? When you think about your workforce, example, what kind of workforce do you see? And they say, we'll be driving a lot of, like in Axiata example, AI at scale. It's going to be AI at scale. We're going to modernize the workforce. What does that mean? Well, we're going to ensure that there's a rapid adoption of cloud technology so people can work from anywhere. So you get that sort of input from the business. So you know where the CEO is heading, where the board is going, what direction. Then it's just really about how do you phase that in. Then, of course, when you're coming with the strategy, there will be a lot of discussion between the CISO, the board, the CIO, the CEO as to do you, example, roll out certain solutions in year 1, year 2, or year 3, and you align it with that. If the business is accelerating certain product rollout, then your roadmap needs to align with that. So the timing also is important in terms of when you introduce, in this case, SASE, because if you introduce it too early, you will have a problem getting your budgets and your resourcing and all of that because business doesn't see value in it. If you come too late, then you have to do a lot of retrofitting, and you will get a lot of pushback from the business because they're saying, oh, security is going to slow us down. So timing, control is one thing. The timing of control is also very important.
Exciting stuff. And I think this is, again, if I'm able to put this video through a YouTube summarizer, I'm sure we'll come out with this very nice PDF with all the key points and the 4 Rs and the business strategy. Exciting stuff. I could keep going, but we have to let you go. Abid, I know you have other things to get to. But the last question that I wanted to ask you is not a cybersecurity or a technology question. It's a personal question around movies, and I've been asking this to all my guests, and I've got some very interesting answers. So what is your favorite movie? It doesn't have to be a cybersecurity movie, but something that you draw inspiration from.
I really like Pursuit of Happiness that Will Smith was in there. I enjoyed that movie quite a bit because it shows it doesn't matter where you start. If you have courage, if you have grit and resilience, then you can do great things in personal or professional life itself. So Pursuit of Happiness, it's for me, that's the favorite movie.
Pursuit of Happiness, all right. It's been a while since I saw it, but there was a phase in my life where I was watching it on repeat. It has a lot of lessons for all of us, and I'm sure there's some cybersecurity analogies that we can draw once we start viewing it from that lens. But Abid, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I'm sure our audience and your peers are going to find this conversation very valuable.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sid.
Thank you. Well, that was a fascinating conversation with Abid. I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience, all of you did as well. If you'd like to continue the conversation about any of the topics you heard in the podcast today, there's a QR code that's flashing up on your screen right now. Just scan it, and we'll figure out a way for us to get in touch and continue the conversation. Until the next episode, this is your host Sid signing off. See you.